Hi, it's me, Ingrid P. And this video is going to be affected by the birds. It's going to be affected by the fact that they're preparing for tomorrow's concerts. Tomorrow, for context, I'm filming this on the 5th. On the 6th of June, it's going to be the National Day here in Sweden. And it's only been a national day just for a few years because Sweden has been neutral in wars, but also because Sweden has never had to be liberated from anyone because they were the colonizers. Something that Sweden has an easy time to dismiss. But yeah, Sweden never, it doesn't have an Independence Day because they don't have to be independent from anyone. But yeah, so my town does a little, concert kind of thingy on that day. Yeah, I'm sorry about the birds. They're just like really active today. Right, so it seems like whenever I pause, they stop, and then whenever I turn the camera on, they make noise. Which is like great. Anyway, I wanted to talk about communication and ableism in communication, but also just accepting different styles of communication, because it's not just about ableism, right? It's also accepting people of different cultures with different accents. It's talking about people who have speech language difficulties of different kinds, but also neurodivergent people and especially autistic people. In my case, because I'm a low support needs autistic person, I speak, I speak, I communicate verbally, I communicate with writing, and I'm sorry, God. Yeah, once I pause the video, then everybody starts being quiet. So it's like, okay. I might have to put my loops in order to hear myself speak. Yeah, so one of those things is noise sensitivity and not knowing how loud your voice is and that kind of thing. That can be a problem. It can also be a problem, nonverbal communication might be a problem. Your accent might be a problem. Your ability to form certain sounds, it might be a problem. If you have a lisp or that kind of thing, if you have a stutter, if you're able to communicate verbally consistently, is a thing, but so I think that there is way too much emphasis on having an effective communication in our society in general, but also, at work and in relationships. And yes, communication is very important for these things. However, I think that we need to also develop a kind of understanding that we are all different and we all struggle with different things and we all communicate differently because we are individual people. And I think that there's so much work to be done there. So for context, I did an evaluation in my work as a doctor. Somebody from the outside who did not know anybody that I work with came and followed me for a day, and I had to mask all day basically. And even when I was masking, I was not doing the thing correctly because of my autistic style of communication, which this person, this evaluator, picked up on. Without knowing that I'm autistic, they picked up on things that are autistic ways of communication. So one of those things is lack of eye contact. There was a lot of emphasis put on that. There was also the fact that I did not speak in the right way in my sentences. another thing, because of the fact that I did not grow up in Sweden, so I don't have the grammar. But my patients understand me. My colleagues understand me. When I've talked to my colleagues about this, they were like, "What do you mean? You speak great Swedish," and also certain phrases that I use, which aren't really the standard phrases that you're supposed to use. I use other kinds of phrases, and I think that patients understand me when I talk, because my colleagues understand me when I talk. But from an outside perspective, they didn't understand when I talked, or they said that they didn't. I don't know. But this isn't the first time that I've seen these kinds of things happen. I have friends who have stutters, and I know what people say behind their backs. I know. There was a doctor that I worked with once who had a really bad stutter. He worked with trauma patients in psychiatry, and then he decided to become a general practice doctor instead. And his stutter was so bad, like it seemed like he was very nervous all the time because of his stutter. But really, and so people started doubting how competent he was, and how he was doing his job. And but he was really good at his job. Like, he didn't, like, when I asked him for help, like asking questions and stuff, he was very competent. He always had an answer. It might take him longer to say what he wanted to say, and it might not be as fluid of an answer than what is expected. But I could communicate with this guy and see that he was a really good doctor. But the problem is that we associate so many personality traits to the way that we communicate, so many flaws. We assign certain intentions on people, or character flaws, due to the style of communication. So he was assigned to the nervous category, and incompetent was his. I mean, I was also seen as incompetent. One of those things is like, this external evaluator saw my lack of eye contact as me not being engaged in conversation with the patient, or not trying to understand a patient, or not having a good contact, like good relationship with my patient, which was not at all the case on my side. And also the patient seemed satisfied at the end of the visit, so I can only assume that we had reached an understanding. I don't think that there was a problem in our communication. But from somebody who does not know how I function, it might seem that I am these certain traits. I'm also often considered childish because I laugh a lot in conversations, and I sometimes laugh at my own jokes, and that is just the way that I am, and that's the way that I speak. And one doctor, when I was in medical school, we had to do another kind of test. It was a test to like show that you could do all of these different exams on a single patient. So we had to like do all of the exams on a single patient, which was a lot, like doing the heart, doing the lungs, doing neurological exam, doing pulses in the feet exam, examination of many different examinations. And this lady had bad hearing. She could not hear. And also, the patient could not hear and also had dementia. So obviously I wasn't going to have an easy communication with her, and when I was asking her to do certain things, we kind of treated it like a game. Like, we knew that we were in a situation where things were going to be a little bit strange, because I wasn't going to do anything with the examination that I was doing. That this patient said yes to this exam, and yeah, so I did all of these things, and we were kind of laughing on the way through. Like, okay, can you take a few steps, and can you turn around? And she was like, oh, I can also dance, and I was like laughing at that, and then at the end of that, the evaluator was like, oh, you're not taking this seriously, it is really childish, and you weren't acting professional. And it's like, yeah, but if you're in on the joke, like, if the patient was like, having a good time and we understood the situation, the context together, then is it really that I was acting unprofessional? Communication takes two, and so maybe for somebody on the outside who's used to a certain style of communication that they want everybody to follow, then yes, it's going to seem unprofessional because I laughed, when really I was doing this, I was taking it seriously. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, So there's that. Then there was another girl in my medical school class who has a very high-pitched voice. So she speaks with a very, very high-pitched voice like this, and that's the way that she speaks. She's always spoken like that. And it's like, well, what is she supposed to do? And she got, and this doctor said that she spoke at a really high-pitched voice, and that she needed to speak louder and deeper. And it was like, she couldn't do that. Like, physically, that was just her voice. She could not change how her voice is. So I remember that she got really sad about that. And I understand, like, wow. People have no understanding that, like, okay, so people are going to speak in ways that you're not going to like. You're going to get annoyed at other people's voices. I mean, yeah, so, like, I'm autistic. I get annoyed at people's voices. But, like, okay, I know that that's the way that they speak. Some people speak with gravelly voices. RFK Jr., he apparently has a condition that makes his voice all gravelly like this. And it's like, well, he can't help it. And so, yeah, I'm not going to make fun of him for his voice, even if he says pretty dumb stuff. I can criticize the dumb stuff that he says, but not like the way that something that he can't change. If you're going to give criticism, it's like, it needs to be something that a person can change, and something that they can change without changing their entire personhood, So, I think that's, and so, okay, my mom has an accent. She's had that accent for 25 years. She's not going to be able to, like, stop having that accent from one day to the next. I love French people. Like, my mom will speak to people in French. Like, she'll be like, bonjour, je voudrais une baguette, s'il vous plaît. And she'd be, like, fluent in French. But then the French person at the counter will be like, oh, can you teach me English? And it's like, she didn't say anything in English. Why are you doing this to her? And it's like, my mom is walking around like this all the time. And so I can only imagine, people who can't speak verbally, and who have to use other kinds of communication devices. Sorry, the sun suddenly came onto my face. And there's a motorcycle, and there are people. Okay, so, anyway, what I'm saying is that there are many different ways of communicating, but that these ways are not necessarily wrong. And also, you know, yes, we can get better communication skills in order to communicate more effectively, to make ourselves be understood, but there's a certain limit to what we can do, because we can't all speak in the same way. Because the way that we speak is, in a way, tied to our personality, it's tied to our upbringing, it's tied to our culture, it's tied to our bodies. You know, like tall people, you know, often have a way of navigating in the world than small people, the short people. It's like, you know, I grew up really fast, and so I'm not. I never grew used to my height, so I don't stand up straight. And it's like, that makes it seem like I have no self-confidence, and I have, you know, and so I've been told to stand up straight for my whole life. And being told that you're a certain way just because of something that you can't, like, you've tried to change for years and you can't change, is extremely frustrating. And so the way that I construct my sentences is different. And had I known that I was able to say all of the neurotypical sentences that you're supposed to, and the way that you're supposed to, with all the words in the right order as you're supposed to, then I would have done it long ago, you know? But because it takes so much energy out of me, it's not worth it. It's not worth the energy to put in to do in that way. So I was really relieved. I talked to my supervisor a little bit, and I talked to my boss as well. I was like, do you think that I don't speak Swedish well? Do you think that I communicate in a way that doesn't? And they were like, no, not at all. They think that I'm, you know, that I can speak Swedish, and that I can communicate effectively. And also my therapist has told me that I can communicate effectively, because I've talked to my therapist a few times about how, you know, I've gotten into misunderstandings quite a lot, and so I sometimes get worried, like, people don't understand me when I talk. Is it that I'm communicating badly? And my therapist said he doesn't have any problems understanding me when I'm communicating. So obviously I'm not perfect at communicating. I have a lot of difficulties with certain kinds of communication, but I don't think that it's worth, you know, people criticizing the way that you communicate is often a bit prejudiced, you know. I'm thinking, you know, people who are of different minorities that aren't taken seriously no matter what they say, because they're not being listened to, you know. I know, for example, that men are more likely to be listened to, and white people are more likely to be listened to. And so even before you open your mouth, people have assumptions about you that will color the way that they understand what you are saying, which is very unfortunate, because we might be saying exactly the same thing, maybe a little bit differently, but it won't be interpreted in the same way, even though it's the same message. So that's really is hurtful as well, you know, when your voice is not listened to. I think that there's quite a lot of this kind of prejudice in society, that isn't even like talked about much or noticed, because obviously having good communication skills is important, you know, in order to function as a society, in order to function as a human being. We need to communicate with people, right? But just because we communicate differently, it's not a character flaw in itself. And just because people misunderstand us does not mean that we haven't tried to communicate effectively to our best of our abilities, you know? And I think a lot of people forget that, and they think that they're being, you know, objective when they're, you know, when they're giving you feedback, you know, in professional settings. I mean, about how you speak, it's colored by all sorts of different ideas that they have about you. So when you talk to somebody, yeah, they're going to, sometimes, no matter how hard you try, or, you know, the way that you usually are is not accepted, and it just makes life harder for you. So this isn't a very positive video, is it? But you know, so I think there is a difference between working on communication skills in order to do a better job at work, in order to have a better relationship with somebody else, and making changes that don't affect the whole way that you are being, that doesn't affect your entire personality. Sure, like, I can improve certain things. However, there are certain things that I will not compromise on and not change about myself just because other people think that there is this specific way of doing things. As long as I feel like people are trying to understand me and I'm doing my best to try to be understood, then I think that we can, like, you know, people can deal with me the way that I am. And if they're not trying to understand, then that's their problem. If I'm not, you know, making enough of an effort of trying to be understood, then I can work on that. But that's all, you know. And I have to work on trying to make myself understood every day, all the time, compared to, I think, a lot of neurotypicals, and I think a lot of people who are privileged in society, you know, don't need to work as hard every day, and they don't need to work on their social skills and their communication skills in the same way that I have had to do throughout my life. And I know that I haven't had to work on my communication skills in a way of somebody who is less privileged than me would have, you know? So, you know, people who are deaf and have to use sign language, like, they had to learn that specific language, especially if it's later in life that they become deaf. So they've had to work really hard to become understood. People use alternative communication devices as well, have had to work on that. People who come from another country have had to work on it in order to learn this new language. People who are, you know, black or indigenous, or, you know, have to code switch between the way that they speak at home with people of their own culture compared to out in the world, and also have to present in a certain way. And yeah, people who you know, are disabled in certain ways also have had to work all their life to, you know, or all their life, you know, they've had to work to be understood. And so asking us to do more is actually harmful, because you're not seeing how much work is going into this every day. I had to not only be evaluated on the way that I was working as a doctor, I also had to be evaluated on how well I was at keeping a mask, which is way more exhausting than for a neurotypical person to have a mask, because my mask is hiding my whole way of being, and it's way more exhausting for me. So the fact that I was working all day that day to mask and to communicate in the way that a neurotypical person would, and I still managed to fail at that, was really disappointing and really discouraging. But I'm trying to realize that, okay, that's not on me, that's on the evaluator for not being open to different styles of communication, for being very normative in their way of thinking. And I can work on certain things that don't have to do with my communication in this case, that have to do with my medical expertise and art of doing things. But I don't need to change myself into a neurotypical person and communicate in that specific way in order for me to be a good person and a good doctor. So tell me what you guys think. I know that this can be a little bit of a sensitive topic, because it is very individual, right? There are a lot of different ways of speaking, and it's also very, sometimes it's clear cut, but sometimes it's very subtle, like trying to describe the way that you're communicating. Sometimes it's just like a vague idea of like, well, I don't communicate in the same way as everybody else, but I don't know really what I'm different in, you know? So have a good day, everybody. Bye.